This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Let's talk about Shedeur Sanders. Let's have an honest conversation about what it is that Shedeur Sanders needs to do this offseason to become the starter for the Cleveland Browns. Because I think most people could agree, and I get it. Browns fans, pretty much the entirety of the life of this channel, have been sensitive about the quarterback position, right? It's been something for a long time where people are sensitive about the quarterback position, and I get why that is. The Browns have gone 25 years without a quarterback, so when you don't have one, you really want one, and whenever somebody says that the guy that you think could be one is not one, it's not just them not agreeing with you, it's them stepping on your dream of your favorite team having a quarterback. I get it. But let's talk about what Shedeur needs to do to potentially get to that point. We're not going to make any kind of determination on the probability that Shedeur gets there, right? We're not going to make any kind of determination on if I think Shedeur gets there or not. We're just going to talk about Shedeur's game and talk about what needs to change, what needs to be demonstrated that has changed to get him to the point to where I think most the fan base and more importantly, the coaching staff and the team can feel comfortable with him as the starter, and not just comfortable, feel like they can win games with him as the starter to a point of like being over 500. So let's talk about that with Shedeur. And I'm going to try to talk about every quarterback on the Cleveland Browns roster right now. So I'm going to do a video about what Shedeur can improve. We're going to talk about the state of Dillon Gabriel, which I think is a lot more interesting than people give it credit for. And then we'll talk about Deshaun Watson. I really don't want to talk about Deshaun Watson, but we'll talk about Deshaun Watson as well. So what does Shedeur need to improve to become the starter? What were the flaws in his game that his extended run kind of exposed? If we're just going off of what we've heard Todd Monken say, what we've heard Andrew Berry say, I think there are a couple of things that really stick out, and the main thing is the turnovers, right? He threw way too many interceptions last year relative to how often he was on the field. And the nature of some of those interceptions were very, 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 very concerning, right? Multiple times in the fourth quarter of football games where Shedeur Sanders has thrown interceptions with a lead that can't really be explained with just regular process of going through the plays. So that's the first thing that needs to be addressed. Not only cut out the interceptions, lower the amount of turnovers, but lower the amount of errant decisions that feel like getting made at times with Shedeur, right? There are times where it just feels like he makes a decision because he's frustrated or a decision because he wants to just do something rather than do nothing and throw the ball out of bounds. I need to see his game from a pocket perspective mature. And that's where his game felt the most immature, is in his decision-making. That's the biggest one with Shedeur. There are too many times where he decides to take a sack instead of throw the ball out of bounds. Too many times where he puts the ball in way too much danger instead of, throwing the ball out of bounds. I guess this goes into the second thing I think Shedeur needs to improve. I don't think he demonstrates that he has great awareness of what's going on in the game for whatever reason, right? Maybe this is just him being used to playing a lot of preseason football. Maybe this is just him knowing that he's in at the end of the season and the games aren't as important, even though I don't think that's a good excuse. Like if he just was like, we're not going to the playoffs and let me just throw some shit while we're up. That's not good. So I would hope it's not that. But there have been multiple times where I have to question whether Shedeur
is fully aware of what the situation in the game is and what his options are as a quarterback. Too many times where the Browns are in field goal range and he starts spinning around and he starts taking sacks. So, I talked about the interceptions earlier, right? Where, you're up in the fourth quarter, you really can't afford an interception. He throws an interception and it's not really an understandable interception. I think some of his most egregious interceptions were of that variety in those situations. If you watch the QB film school breakdown of Shedeur, there are times where he just runs out of bounds and takes a sack instead of throwing the ball out of bounds as well. Just small stuff like that is where you really need to see his game mature, because that's where I had kind of the most severe questions about where his game is, because he's not a super young quarterback prospect, right? He's not one of these guys who's coming into the league at 20, 21 years old, like a J.J. McCarthy or a Anthony Richardson. He's not one of these guys who didn't play a lot of college football. He is seasoned for a young player. He played 4 years of college football. He's 23 years old. I think he's about to be 24 coming up soon. He should know better than some of the mistakes that he made last season. Regardless of how many reps you get in training camp, like there are some mistakes that he made that you want him to be better than. It's his rookie year, so people are going to give it some natural grace, and I'm inclined to give him that natural grace. It's just, if we're rolling into next season with him as the starter, I really need to see that part of his game mature, because we can deal with limitations at the quarterback position. We can't deal with a quarterback at that position that's not a proficient game manager. And too often I felt like Shedeur failed as a game manager during the season last year. So again, not trying to put him on the cross and say his career's over because he had those struggles last year, but trying to identify exactly where he struggled. And I think you can kind of pinpoint it down to three types of errors, right? There's the holding on to the ball stuff, which happens a lot with him, which I think can be fixed. You just don't want that kind of stuff to happen when you're in scoring range, in field goal range, and it takes you out of field goal range. There is the errant interception stuff where he just tries to make something happen. He has to make that step himself. I think that is purely Shedeur knowing he's a playmaker and wanting to force a play to be made instead of just allowing plays to come to him when they're there to be made. So he's got to have better shot selection at times, right? He's a good playmaker. He can make some tremendous throws on the run especially, but he's got to have better shot selection and better judgment. And if he demonstrates that, I think that's the first thing you want to see him demonstrate in 7-on-7s, in OTAs, in training camp. It's just better judgment, better awareness of what's going on and what the situational drill is. Getting the ball out quickly in 7-on-7s, not necessarily holding the ball and doing a lot of scrambling. My number one pet peeve of quarterbacks, regardless, is quarterbacks who scramble in 7-on-7s. I can't fucking stand it. It is pointless, right? It's a useless exercise, scrambling in 7-on-7s. 7-on-7s, you should get the ball out. 1, 2, 3, out. It should be out, right? I think you want to see that from Shedeur. Get that ball out on that drop. Use the fact that you're not dealing with a pass rush to work on what it feels like to get the ball out on that back step, right? That's also where I hope Todd Monken helps him out, right? Just making sure that we're getting useful work out of those 7-on-7s, because I think Kevin kind of let that shit go on too much with all the quarterbacks, by the way, right? Like, there were too many times where I'm seeing Kenny Pickett spin around and roll out and try to like make a throw in a 7-on-7 drill. The same thing with Shedeur. And it drove me crazy last year, because how does that help anybody develop when you're not making these 7-on-7s useful for the quarterbacks or for anybody involved, right? For the wide receivers, it's like, well, you're going to practice scramble drill all the time, or are you going to practice getting the ball when it's supposed to be out? Like, the whole point of there not being an offensive line is that you can get the ball out, know what it feels like to be on time and not to worry about the pass being batted. You're supposed to build that comfort there. Really need to see, not only from Shedeur's side, but from the coaching side, a little bit more discipline to sticking to that, because I thought that our 7-on-7 reps last year were completely useless 7-on-7 reps, like the peak tier of useless 7-on-7 reps. And I think that's why the quarterback play was so bad last year. But that's my rant about 7-on-7 football and all that shit aside. I do think that if you're the Browns, you just want to see Shedeur play better situational football. You want to see him get the ball out quickly, kind of understand where he is, just manage the games better. I would be interested in giving him extended run in the preseason this year too, just to see how he handles those kind of situations, making sure that he gets those reps at the end of the second quarter, going into halftime, or even at the end of the game where the clock starts to matter. Really put him in situations where he has to manage the game, because I think that's where his game needs a lot of growth.
Talk to you guys real quick about Sleeper, the app for daily fantasy, regular fantasy. And now if you look at the pick section on the Sleeper app and go to the team section, you have predictions that you can now use on the Sleeper app. You can choose winners of games. So let's say you're a Cavs fan, the Cavs play the Wizards or something like that, and you think the Cavs are going to beat the Wizards. You can pick the Cavs to beat the Wizards in that kind of scenario. For me personally, I went with the Cavs getting the championship this year. And of course, I had to throw in the same for the Cleveland Browns winning the next Super Bowl. So if you want to join in the fun on that, make sure you join the Sleeper app. If you also want to use the Sleeper app for all the other things I mentioned, make sure you use the promo code Worst Take. Get a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Make sure you join the Sleeper app.
There is another area I think Shedeur needs to improve to be the starter. It's something I talked about all the time in his film breakdown. Shedeur has the icing on the cake in his game to put him over the top if he just develops better essentials to his game, right? I think that's the big thing for Shedeur. He has the special stuff, right? He can throw a ball, put it on the dot. He can break out, roll left, roll right, throw a ball, scramble. He can make plays from the quarterback position, which is, it's not nothing. It's not something to just snuff at. The big issue with Shedeur and why it didn't feel like he was putting together playable games at the end of the season is because he didn't have enough essentials to really rely on. So what ended up happening was that they had to run the same plays over and over again in order to do stuff that Shedeur was comfortable with. And because they're running the same plays over and over again, defenses start to key in on that and start to key in on what he can do. He did not have a wide enough variety of essentials to go to that once teams started to condense that, he really had nothing else that he could do, and why he looked so poor at the end of the season. So if you're Shedeur, you need to broaden the variety of plays that you feel comfortable with, concepts that you feel comfortable with, right? I think Shedeur was comfortable with a limited amount of concepts in the Browns' offensive in the offensive playbook last year. I think that needs to expand. I think also if you're Shedeur, it's nice that you have that ability to throw on a run, but you need to find a way or find some go-to things in your game in the pocket for you to win. I think less is more can work for Shedeur. I think if he relies on the improvisational parts of his game less and creates more of a base out of his ability to just function in the pocket, execute plays quickly, have some go-to concepts that he's really good at reading on both sides of the field and really nailing that down. If he can get that And then, 20% of his game, 30% of his game is the special sauce that he can create. I think that 30% would be much, much, much more effective for him and allow him to not just be a starting quality quarterback, but a plus level starting quality quarterback. I think Shedeur can get there talent-wise, but it's going to take a lot of work for him to get there, right? I said last year, I think you give him a couple of years, the right kind of development track, he could be what Geno Smith was for the Seattle Seahawks. Something along those lines, that level of quarterback. I've never been low on Shedeur's potential as a quarterback. I've always thought, somewhere between Teddy Bridgewater, maybe like there's a Tua in between there, or there's like Geno Smith there too. But those are all starting quality quarterbacks at one point of their career. So I've always thought he had the potential to be a starter. The big issue is how does he get there and how much work does he need to get there? And that's where I disagree with most people on. I think there's a significant amount of work that needs to be done for him to get there. It's definitely possible, right? But there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. I think the situational stuff is probably the most concerning thing for me if we're talking about problems that present red flags of sorts. It's the situational stuff for me, because somebody at his level of play, his level of experience should just be much better at situational football than he is, and much more aware. So it makes me wonder, is this like a J.R. Smith situation where, he gets into a flow state, he's not really paying attention to those smaller details? That could be a very big concern at the quarterback position. But if he could demonstrate during training camp and during the preseason that he can be much more aware, much more a much better manager of the game than he was last year, then you don't have that giant concern to worry about. As far as his tools go, his tools are fine. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but it's fine. It'll work, right? I do think that he has his physical tools kind of require that he gets better pass protection than most quarterbacks. So you are going to have to be able to give him, maybe not 3 seconds of pocket time, but you're definitely going to have to, on average, be able to give him about 2.5 to 2.7 seconds of pocket time in order for him to access all the throws that he has access to, because he is somebody who does need to put his whole body into a lot of throws in order to make them, but he can make the throws. It's just he needs to put his body into it. In order to put your whole body into it, you need to play with a lot of clean pockets. So, yeah, I do think Shedeur is somebody who will benefit a lot from having more clean pockets and really does need those clean pockets to access the entirety of his game. Because if you take away that, then now you're leaning on his natural ability to throw the ball, his arm talent. He's not great in the arm talent area, right? He struggles there. But if you give him protection, give him the space he needs to throw, then he can make all the throws. He's a pretty, surprisingly good scrambler. I think he's a plus scrambler. I don't think he's somebody you would run on a dedicated run play. But, hey, look, I thought he was slow coming out of college as far as foot speed goes. He surprised me. He's a much better athlete and runner in space. And I thought it's kind of like Jacoby Brissett, where Jacoby Brissett's long speed's like 5 flat. So you think he's a terrible scrambler, but then you watch him and it's like, oh, no, he's a pretty good scrambler. So he has that ability. I think that ability will open up stuff when he does roll and try to improvise. And I think, again, if you can get the essentials down with him, right, better game management, open up, get a wider variety of concepts that he feels comfortable with on both sides of the field instead of just one side of the field, and just get him more in his bag. I think that's the biggest thing. He needs more in his bag so that when he does have to go to that improvisational stuff, where I think he has a really good special vision down the field. He does a great job of it's not imagining, but it's he does a great job of seeing how things can open up naturally when he rolls out, right? It's not a ability that a lot of quarterbacks have. So he has that ability. You can pair that with better essentials. You got a starting quarterback there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. I don't know if that amount of work can be done in a year, but if you were just asking me, hey, can Shedeur become a starter eventually in the league? My answer would be yes. This is what he would have to do. I think there's a lot of work that he has to do, but I think the work can be done. And I'm not going to say that about every quarterback in the NFL. So we'll see where we're at. We'll see if the Browns feel like it's worthwhile to do that work with Shedeur, or maybe they feel like it's more worthwhile to do work at that level with somebody else. We'll see what they decide, right? They got a whole offseason, free agency, all of that. But if you're asking me specifically about Shedeur and what I think he needs to do to become a starting quarterback in the NFL, I think there it is. And when I say starting quarterback, I mean winning starting quarterback. A lot of guys can start and win like 4 games, 5 games. We're talking about over 500, get the team to the playoffs, give us some legitimate hope at the position. That's what needs to be achieved to reach that level of play.